Penelope, or Penny as I always called her, and I have been married for 28 years. Our 28th year marked an ending, but also a beginning. This was the year our third and youngest child went off to college. We just saw her off, so we officially became empty nesters. I wanted to use this opportunity to try to revive Penny and I's personal life, which had languished during our marriage, largely due to lack of energy and privacy. As working-class people, we have a small house with thin walls, not a huge mansion with nannies and maids. I thought that everything was going according to plan and my plan would succeed. As soon as we got home, I carried Penny upstairs and, despite her protests, "Mike, my butt hurts after the trip," and "let me take a shower first," I had sex with her. She seemed to enjoy it, and I hoped it was a foretaste of things to come. After all this time, I was still passionately in love with my wife and still lusted after her like a pervert. At 48 years old, she still works up an appetite. Penny is a nurse and was in training when we met. Between the births of her children and then the time and money constraints of raising them, Penny remained a general nurse. Over the years, she had seen and commented on more than one occasion when young nurses would come in, fresh out of school, take the basic course, and get promoted. Or worse, get promoted instead of her. To say that she was outraged by this would be like saying that the Pope was slightly Catholic. After some pretty impressive sex, I was introduced to what was obviously a well-thought-out plan on her part. Penny says there is a chronic shortage of pediatric nurses at the hospital where she works. The intensive 6-month training course will allow Penny to remain employed at the same hospital. She knew for sure that the head nurse of the same department in another hospital in the city would retire in 2 years, and she would be able to apply for this vacancy. This, in turn, will put Penny in a prime position to succeed her current hospital's matron when she retires in 5 years. This is the main prize that Penny was counting on. She did her research and found out that she could be paid during the 6 months of training, so it would not be a burden on my modest income, and her increased salary would help us achieve our goal of retiring at 60 with a comfortable bank account. I looked at Penny, amazed at this newfound ambition on her part. It was like seeing her for the first time, scary and exciting. I realized that my wife was still capable of surprising me, and scared. Considering that everything is thought out to the smallest detail, I wondered why I only heard about it now for the first time. Why didn't she ask me for advice? Didn't ask for my help? Why did you hide these hopes, dreams, and plans from me? Haven't I always encouraged her? Even now, as a seed of anxiety grew inside me, I was inclined to support her dream. That was until the reason for her reticence became clear. The only place Penny could take this course was in another state, an hour and a 2:50 flight away. 6 months. It's been a long time, Pen. Is there anything closer? They don't offer an online course? No, they don't offer it. And it's not such a long time. Time will fly by. During the war, couples did this all the time. Hell, they got by with just letters for years. And of course, we can afford you to fly in once a month. I was silent, turning over questions and answers in my mind. Before I could voice any objections or even ask further questions, Penny exclaimed angrily, "Jesus, Mike, don't be so arrogant." This made me wince. I've never been arrogant. Not with her, not with our daughters. I was so offended that I almost missed the rest of her outrage. If it was about you and your career, the whole damn world would expect support and encouragement from me. But since I am a woman, you think that I am selfish for wanting you to support me in my dream. Selfish? When did I even have the opportunity to make such an accusation? I barely had a chance to get a word in edgewise. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. Anger will not lead to anything good. Pen, I'm not selfish and I don't blame you for it. Just trying to figure things out. You've clearly thought a lot about this for a long period of time, while I only had 10 minutes. Penny immediately took on an air of remorse. Her tone changed from harsh to neutral as she explained further. Housing student nurses and working in a teaching hospital will keep the depletion of our pension funds to a minimum. Flying Penny back home for 6 months probably wouldn't be practical given how busy she would be, but it would be possible for me to fly her over once a month or so to spend a weekend together. It all sounded pretty reasonable, but I have to say that the gap between my plans for the immediate future and Penny's was confusing and, in hindsight, I think made me vulnerable. Penny began nibbling on my ear, initiating a welcome second round, and effectively forcing me to swallow any questions I might still have. Ask any sex-starved guy. In such circumstances, they will agree to almost anything. So I agreed for Penny to attend the next course. The last bomb exploded as she hurriedly climbed aboard. The course began the following week. After that, my well-thought-out questions meant nothing. I already agreed, remember? I felt like I was being manipulated. Penny left after a flurry of activities, looking like a child going to her first camp. She was so excited that she barely remembered to kiss me goodbye. I'm ashamed to admit, but I had a hard time getting into the new daily routine. For many years, I didn't have to think about what I would do in my free time. I'm guilty of leaving the planning of our social life to Penny. As long as she made time for the side of the family where I was happy that she was in charge of that aspect of our lives. I'm not alone in this, knowing that the same applies to most of the guys I work with. Most of Penny's evenings and weekends, excluding the children, were filled with activities that Penny organized and devoted to us. Or I did the necessary things in life, like mowing the lawn, washing cars, and driving the children to and from sporting events. Now, from 6 in the evening, when I came home from work, until 10 or 11 at night, I was lonely and bored. It's not that I was used to going somewhere all the time because we never did that, but now there was no one to talk to when the newscaster informed us about yet another stupid mistake of one of our politicians, or to hold hands and laugh while we were watching one of our favorite shows. I even missed Penny rubbing her feet. During the first week of Penny's absence, we talked for 30 minutes in the evenings. I have to admit, I wondered if she had taken our rising phone bill into account when planning and budgeting. I also have to admit that I felt jealous. She was clearly busy and enjoying the new challenge. She dominated our conversations, telling all her news. Her excitement was palpable. The names of people I didn't know jumped out at me nonchalantly. It made me feel rejected, like I had no place at this point in her life. At the same time, our conversations always ended very nicely and gave me hope. Perhaps her absence will strengthen our hearts, and when she returns, we can continue my plans to resume our sex life. By the second week, our 30-minute evening conversations had dropped to 20 minutes because Penny said she needed to study, and our conversations were throwing her out of her nursing mindset. It was painful. Now I was reduced to the level of an intrusive interlocutor. I tried to always end our conversations on a loving note, but by the end of the week it started to feel a little one-sided. However, I tried to remain encouraging and supportive, keeping my frustrations and loneliness to myself. In the third week, she asked that we call only once every 2 evenings, and oddly enough, she suggested that she call me, and not vice versa. This way, she said, I won't distract her at inconvenient times. In the fourth week, I only received 2 calls. I tried to be understanding about this. She had her first serious assignment, and she was working the evening shift, but it was difficult. I was glad that I would fly to her on the weekend. I missed her, missed us. Fate had other plans. My planned trip had to be canceled at the last minute because Penny said there was a flu outbreak and the hospital was overwhelmed with patients. In the teaching hospital, everyone worked like in a mine. This weekend did pay some dividends. While refueling, I met an old friend of mine, from whom I had grown estranged over the years. He and a group of his buddies played poker every Saturday night at the local pub. He invited me to join them, and given that I was tired of being out of work and forgotten by my wife, I went. The company was pleasant. We played a few friendly games in the back room and then headed to the bar for some relaxing ale. After years of my social life consisting of neighborhood barbecues, small local family-style bistros, and kid-friendly events, The pub was something of a revelation. I was stunned by the number of single ladies my age or slightly younger who boldly approached me and, frankly, tried to pick me up. It's funny how, after a few years of marital bliss and diapers, you forget that these things happen in bars. It took 3 Saturdays and, I admit, a number of other days of the week when it was clear that Penny would not call that evening before the pestering became regular enough that it could not be passed off as a coincidence. I asked my buddy Jeff what was going on. "Mike, you're really off topic, aren't you? Haven't you noticed that at our age there are already noticeably more single women than single men? What you see are widows, abandoned for a younger model, abandoned due to a midlife crisis, deceived by cheaters." "But why me?" "Come on, Mike. You've been married so long that your confidence as a man is inextricably tied to what your wife thinks and says. Look in the mirror and then look around you, buddy. You look better than most. And because of your physical work, you are still lean and muscular. You don't have a wife chasing you around with a shotgun, and you don't sit at home with the kids. Buddy, if you took off your wedding ring, you'd sleep with one of them within 2 hours without using a single chat line or buying a single drink." I looked around, noticing more than one hungry look. Jeff followed my gaze. "I don't want to cheat on Penny, Jeff. I understand that, but let's just imagine that you're up for sale. If I were you, I'd avoid being too aggressive. They are dressed to kill tonight to find the man. Hell, I hate to say it, but I think half of them are married and looking for a quick fling. Although, to be honest, the same could be said about half the guys here. Now look at that table over there." Jeff pointed to a table with a sad-looking woman of about 40, surrounded by 5 friends. The sad-looking woman has probably just been exchanged for a younger model and is now being consoled by her friends. She'll be back in a few weeks, wanting to get laid, to convince herself that she's still attractive and that it's all her ex-husband's fault, or to get revenge. If you need a quickie, come back then, or don't show your wedding ring the next time one of the cougars comes over. It all depends on what you want. If you're looking for something more long-term, take a look at that table over there. Jeff pointed to a table where 4 ladies around my age were sitting. They laughed and had a good time. From what I saw, it looked like 2 of them had wedding rings and 2 didn't. As we watched, 3 of them looked around the room. This is where I would look if I were single. This is a group of work friends who decided to have a good time together. 2 of them are married, but that doesn't stop one. The other 2 are lonely, but not desperate. They may take advantage of the opportunity, but they will not look for it. At that moment, my cell phone buzzed with an incoming text message from Penny, where she was apologizing and explaining that she was working and couldn't take a break to call me. I tried to be grateful that she bothered to write a message, but it wasn't easy. Since the calls and texts became less and less frequent the longer she was gone, it was difficult to feel grateful. But at least she didn't even forget to sign with the words, "Love you." It was better than her last 2 messages. I responded with a quick, "I love you too," before looking at Jeff to continue. "Okay, I'll prove that I'm right. Take off your ring, then go to the part of the bar closest to that table and order yourself a drink." I did, as he suggested. Leaning against the counter, waiting to be served, I watched what was happening out of the corner of my eye. My elbows had been resting on the tabletop for no more than 60 seconds when one of the married women jumped up, tucking a ring into her pocket. She rather boldly asked if she could buy me a drink, but lost interest as soon as I said I was married. I have to admit, I also told her that I just saw her take off her wedding ring. She had the decency to blush. The others at her table were watching what was happening, and before she could leave, one of the unmarried women approached me. She approached me just as the bartender was taking my order, then waited for my drink to arrive before placing her order. I looked back at their table and saw that everyone's glasses were at least half full, so I wasn't surprised when my new neighbor at the bar said hello and struck up a polite conversation. A quick glance told me she wasn't exactly my type, and my body language must have given me away because she soon returned to her table with a round of drinks. I continued to sip my drink, waiting for Jeff to return from the restroom to tell him how right he was, when I heard a quiet, "Hello," behind me. Turning around, I saw the second unmarried lady from behind that table, looking at me confidently. With my newfound understanding of the alignment, I guessed that she was creating an opportunity, but wouldn't be upset if it didn't work out. If I were single, this girl would interest me. It was difficult to determine her age. She could be either my age or 5 to 10 years younger. Attractive, slim but not anorexic, soft honey hair curling around her face, and a genuine smile. I looked at her ring finger, but didn't see an untanned mark, then looked at mine. Because of my job, I only wore the ring when going out, so there was no mark on my finger either. Tradition required that I offer her a drink. "No need," she said, picking up her glass and carefully tilting it this way and that before taking a sip. There was a confidence in her voice that was very attractive. She is clearly a woman who is comfortable in her own skin. Then we started a casual conversation about everything under the sun. 10 minutes later, I had to admit that I was actually married even though I didn't have a ring. I could have lied about where it was and why it was in my pocket, but something forced me to be completely honest with Andrea. As it turned out, that was the name of the attractive blonde. She questioned me about my behavior, which, at first glance, was mean and dishonest. "Hey, in my defense, one of your friends came up to me not 20 minutes ago." She was so frank that she didn't even try to be subtle, as she took off her rings and stuffed them into her pocket. "This is Carol. She's not really my friend. I just met her this evening. She came with Sue, who is my friend. They work together. To be honest, I couldn't believe it when I saw it either. It makes you feel a little sorry for her husband, doesn't it?" I nodded. "For your information, I took mine off not because I wanted to have fun, but because I was testing my buddy Jeff's theory about why women our age frequent bars." Andrea laughed a lot when I explained Jeff's theory in detail. Mostly she agreed with him. Then the conversation turned to Penny. "My wife has been on a 6-month course out of state for almost 2 months now, and I hate to admit it, but I feel kind of lost without her." "You must miss her." I nodded. "Very. She is busy with work and study. We don't even get to talk often. That's why I came here. Tired of sitting alone and staring at the 4 walls of our living room alone." "So you're just looking for company? No pickups or one-night stands?" I was somewhat shocked by her frank question. "No, I'm monogamous. But this does not mean that I cannot enjoy female communication and conversations." Andrea clearly approved of my answer. "Well, then let's continue the conversation." Talking to Andrea was very easy. She told how she and her husband invested so much in their children while they were growing up that when the nest was empty, they became practically strangers. 6 months ago, they decided to split amicably, and Andrea enjoyed the freedom. But if the right guy came along, she didn't rule out the possibility of a relationship. We ended up chatting for over an hour. Finally, it became obvious that her friends were leaving. I saw Andrea debating whether to stay or not, but in the end, she decided to leave. I took the fact that she even considered staying as a compliment, because knowing that there was no prospect of a relationship with me, she must have simply enjoyed my company and conversation. After Penny's rejections, this was refreshing. Penny's phone calls became even more infrequent and shorter. We talked for 5 to 10 minutes twice a week. I consciously developed a new relaxed attitude towards life, partly to keep my sanity. There's no point in fighting. Penny isn't interested. A couple of times when I mentioned the waning calls, she told me to stop being such a child and not try to make her life difficult with my persuasion. Isn't she in the same boat? Doesn't she have enough worries without my whining? My protests, denials that I was whining and that I was simply stating facts, went unheard, and as punishment, I did not hear from her for 5 days. I refused to be unhappy, and I was tired of feeling frustrated and powerless, and at Penny's whim, so I started going to the bar several times a week just to chat with people and socialize. My visit to Penny the following weekend was inconvenient, as she had assignments. It was painful. We've been apart for 10 weeks, and I found myself inconvenient. I felt like I wasn't that important to her. She clearly didn't make any effort to find time for me, for us. During the last 3 conversations, She didn't even bother to ask what I was doing. When the following week she announced that she was suffering from heavy periods and was not in the mood to accept me, I was not surprised. The next evening, I broke protocol and called her on her cell phone. One of her roommates responded to me and said that Penny took sleeping pills and went to bed, leaving her phone number with her friend for peace of mind. In the meantime, I was quite happy with my social life. It was much better than sitting at home waiting for phone calls that invariably never came. The lack of phone calls made me feel like a love-struck teenage loser sitting by the phone. I joined the Thursday night darts competition as one of the teams had a player transferred to another state, and I enjoyed the Tuesday night little quizzes a lot more than I ever thought I would. I met new and interesting people of both sexes, always telling single ladies that I was married and not interested in cheating. I often saw Andrea always coming up to chat when she was there with her friends. She started spending some time with a guy and recognized that he was interesting enough to start a relationship with. However, this only lasted 2 weeks before he disappeared. According to her, she could not withstand his onslaught in terms of sex, and he left. This suited her. It failed the severity test. We were very careful to avoid serious conversations about Penny and my relationship, and Andrea never once expressed her opinion about Penny or her behavior, which was fine with me. I was angry at my wife and her complete disregard for me. We didn't see each other for 14 weeks, and phone calls continued to be rare and short. Worse, when we did talk, I felt like I was imposing myself on her. Of course she's busy. Sure, she had taken on the difficult task of juggling work and school, but did that mean I should be cast aside, forgotten like a pair of old, worn-out shoes? Could regular short conversations and texting really be that detrimental to achieving her goal? The more time I spent with Andrea, the more I liked her. She was warm and friendly, funny and smart. I even liked it when she asked me to help her. It made me feel useful. When she approached a new guy at the bar or someone approached her, I would wait for her signal. If she wasn't interested but had a hard time leaving, she'd give me a sign. I'd walk over, kiss her on the cheek, and let the guy know we were a couple. He left, and I chatted with Andrea until he left the bar. What bothered me was how impatiently I was looking forward to talking to her. She was an excellent conversationalist. We actually talked. There was no flirting, unless you consider discussing Pepsi versus Coca-Cola flirting. There was never anything inappropriate. And yet I could not deny that I felt disappointed if I did not see her in my evenings. For the first time in my life, I realized how you can seduce a person into an affair. Suddenly old cliches like, my wife doesn't understand me or my wife ignores me. It's not that I think cheating is normal in certain circumstances, but I have a whole new understanding of how a person can slip into cheating. I was tempted, very strong. It was a situation I never thought I would find myself in, and with each passing day, my ability to resist temptation grew increasingly weaker. So far, I had managed to control myself and not touch Andrea in a way. That would be inappropriate for a married man, but I was no saint or eunuch. With daily reminders of Penny's indifference, I didn't know how much longer I could hold out. I wondered if Penny was experiencing the same thoughts and feelings, but almost immediately dismissed the possibility. She's too busy with work and school to miss me, not to mention she doesn't have time to seduce another man. However, we were only halfway through her training course, and I knew I had to do something or our marriage would be ruined. Long before the 6 months were up, and I would become a bad boy, something I never thought I was capable of. I decided to call Penny without expecting her to call me. Hi, darling. I cannot speak for a long time. I held back my irritation at her first sentence. Anger won't do you any good. I know, you always seem to be busy, but I need you to find time now. I'll be brief. I heard her sigh of impatience and swallowed a little more irritation. Penny, I'll get straight to the point. You don't have time for me anymore. The calls are becoming less and less frequent, and even when we talk, you treat me as if I'm bothering you. You deny my feelings and needs. It's like you forgot that there are 2 people in our marriage. Yes, I'm here to love, support, and encourage you, but I also deserve some time and attention. If I was hoping my words would get through to her, I was out of luck. Jesus Christ, Mike. What are you saying? 2. I have spent my entire adult life putting my family first. Now it's my turn. You make it sound like I didn't put our family first, Penny. Like I didn't sacrifice or compromise for my family. I gave up a lot. In every way, he put you and the children first. Tell me, since you brought it up, when was it my turn? Because I think I missed it. I was probably too busy with work to notice. Me too, Penny cried. How dare you imply that I didn't do it, you ignorant son of a bitch? I ignored her for the next 60 or so seconds, knowing I didn't want to have the memory of the insults I knew were spewing out of her. When she ran out of steam, I tried again. Penny, our marriage is in trouble. Can't you see it? If everything remains as it is, or even, God forbid, degrades even more, we will not have a marriage at all by the time you finish this course. Lord, I'm tired of your whining and guilt. Grow up. I didn't hear the rest of her diatribe because I hung up. This must have pricked her conscience because she immediately called back. Look, I'm sorry, Mike, but you have to understand how important this is to me. I need it. Our marriage is fine. I didn't argue with her further. She didn't listen. Of course, I miss you terribly too, and I'm sorry that you're having a hard time without me. But in the long run, it will be good for us. You will see. We're already halfway there. When I return, I will put the house in order, and you will eat normally again. Her tone took me by surprise. She sounded condescending. I felt like a child being scolded. Yes, it's hard for me without her, but not in the way she thought. She seemed to think I was incapable of taking care of myself. I looked around the room. She looked the same as always, clean, neat, and organized. I coped well with everyday activities. My clothes are washed, the refrigerator is stocked, the floors and countertops are clean, the dishes are washed. She didn't understand at all what was going on. I miss intimacy and communication. I miss my wife, friend, and life partner. After 28 years, our lives were intertwined in every aspect, and her absence felt like a part of me had been cut off. I made a sound that she seemed to interpret as agreement. Okay, I'm glad we sorted this out. Now it's really time for me to go. After she passed out, once again forgetting to tell me that she loved me, I took the keys and went to the pub. Perhaps a cold ale will soothe my disappointment. Halfway through my first glass of beer, I realized I had made a mistake. I was not in the mood to interact with people or talk. I was hurt and angry. Anxiety, resentment, and disappointment. My gut is filled with too many emotions. They bubbled in my stomach like bubbles in a washing machine. Even Andrea's friendly smile could not lift my spirits. I finished my last beer and said a hasty goodbye, left, and returned home. As soon as I entered the door, I received an SMS on my mobile phone. Are you okay? You weren't yourself today. I worry. Call me if you need someone to talk to. I stared at the message. There were unshed tears in his eyes. The woman I had known for only 2 months cared more about my well-being than my wife of 28 years. I sat down on the sofa, and for the first time since meeting Andrea, I didn't know what to answer her. I was scared. Have we gotten too close? Am I to blame for having an emotional affair? Until now, we had never talked about Penny or the state of my marriage, and I had not told her anything I would be embarrassed to admit to my wife, but I knew I had to be careful. I'm fine. Just a bad day. See you on Thursday if you're at the pub. Be healthy, Miki. I stared at the text for a long time, checking and double-checking that it was casual enough before hitting the button, send. I heated up the leftovers and ate them while standing at the sink. As I ate, I realized that Penny and I hadn't discussed my visit the following weekend. Penny didn't say anything, so I decided to book a spontaneous plane ticket for next Friday. I couldn't wait another week to see my wife. I needed to see her face, hear her laugh, and smell her hair, to remind myself how much I loved her. Although the possibility of Penny misbehaving while away never occurred to me, I decided to make my visit a surprise. This way, she won't be able to brush me off again. Finally, Friday came. I left work early and went straight to the airport. Everything went smoothly, and by 6 o'clock in the evening, I showed up on Penny's doorstep. The call was answered by a girl whose voice I recognized was Jenny, the girl who answered Penny's calls that day. She led me into their small living room and explained that Penny and their other housemate, Gail, weren't home from school yet. When I took my phone out of my pocket, she waved at me, saying she'd call Penny, and she looked a little worried. Before she had time to press 3 buttons, the sound of a key was heard at the front door. Penny seemed pleasantly surprised to see me, and after a quick kiss, she ran off to the toilet. I thought it was strange that she took her phone with her, but since Jenny was looming over me, I didn't comment. Jenny and I were having an awkward conversation while waiting for Penny, who seemed to be in the restroom for a long time. Before she had time to return to the hallway, she rushed down the corridor to her room, telling me to continue talking to Jenny. Jenny seemed to relax, and our conversation became less tense. After my evenings in the pub, the 20-something-year age difference didn't bother me. While we were chatting, I saw Penny take a load of sheets to the laundry room and come back with fresh ones. I smiled. Was she trying to impress me like she did when we were dating? When the room was apparently tidy to Penny's satisfaction, she invited me to shower and freshen up with her before we went outside. Despite the frosty air, Penny opened the window in her room, which seemed strange to me, since I knew that she hated the cold. After more than 3 months of absence, seeing Penny naked, water cascading down her broad breasts, I could barely contain myself. I proposed but was told to wait until after dinner for dessert. It was late, and Penny was hungry. We managed to get to a nice seafood restaurant that Penny had told us about. When Penny laughed at my traditional seafood restaurant joke, "Don't believe the stories about oysters being an aphrodisiac. I ate 12 once, and the last 3 didn't work." I decided that my decision to surprise her was the right one. We had a good time with 2 bottles of good Riesling between us. But one detail marred the evening. The detail that made this evening just good, not great. Penny kept interrupting our conversations to read and then respond to text messages. I debated whether to talk about this since we have taught our children that such behavior is rude. At the risk of ruining the evening, I brought it up. "Oh dear, you know that normally I wouldn't do something like this, but I'm one of the older students here, and some of the younger ones look up to me as a mentor. I do not for a long time." And with these words, she replied to another SMS. In between devouring salmon and texting, she asked how long I intended to stay, since she had 2 tasks to complete over the weekend. I tried not to feel overwhelmed by her question. I barely had time to arrive, and she was already putting me on a plane home. Despite wanting to be alone with Penny, I took my time at dinner, courting her as if we were young lovers again rather than an old married couple who knew each other inside and out. Finally, by the time we walked hand in hand the 7 or so blocks to Penny's house, it was already 11. There was a second car in the driveway that Penny said belonged to Gail. Gail, I learned, worked as a waitress to pay for her courses and usually finished around 10. The apartment was quiet, only the hallway light was on for illumination when we entered. After dinner and wine, not to mention our previous shower, I was on edge. The time for courtship has passed. I picked my wife up in my arms, carried her to her room, and threw her on the bed. After 15 weeks of abstinence, I fought the urge to just take her roughly. Normally I would have done this, but there was a strange atmosphere that evening. She had been lurking on the edge of consciousness all evening. It seemed that we were strangers. The conversation during dinner and walks back and forth was slightly strained, as if we didn't have as much in common as we did just 4 months ago. Taking her roughly implied familiarity. I felt the same as when we first met. In short, I felt the need to impress and satisfy. So, as Penny lay on the bed, tired and a little tipsy, I tore off her panties and she did the same with her top. She was slightly confused, which allowed me to quickly undress. Penny began to jerk and moan loudly. It was a far cry from the Penny I knew, the one who had always been a little reserved sexually. I always attributed her reticence to her strict Catholic upbringing. This, and 3 children in the apartment. Knew Penny was having fun and didn't care who knew about it. I was in uncharted territory when Penny relaxed like a rag doll, Her recovery and pulling me to her chest was all the guidance I needed. I think she missed our sex life as much as I did during our separation. I was in seventh heaven. They say that heaven and hell are separated only by the thickness of a molecule. This is true. Just before I completely lost control, there was an impatient knock on the flimsy inner bedroom door. An unfamiliar female voice shouted clearly and clearly, "A penny? Jake, for heaven's sake, 3 nights in a row? I need to fucking sleep." It was the verbal equivalent of a bucket of ice water. Many things suddenly made sense. A shaved pubic area, a strange stranger between us, a reduction in phone calls, opposition every time I suggested coming to visit, a sudden change of bed linen. Even her disappearing into the bathroom for an awkward time when she first came home and found me there. I could well imagine her in the toilet, whispering to her boyfriend about a change of plans. Was it really him that she was texting the whole time we were in the restaurant? I looked into her eyes and saw horror in them. I saw a man who knew he had to say something, and quickly, but did not know what words to use to save a disastrous situation. I looked down at her. Her hair was a mess, and her makeup was smeared. The legs that I once considered the longest and most beautiful on the planet disgusted me. Her whole appearance disgusted me. Now she looked like who she was, an adulteress, a traitor. Now I saw only the traitor. Instinctively, I knew I had to get out of there before my caveman instincts took over and I did no harm. She wasn't worth going to jail over. Quickly putting on my scattered clothes, I was left with only an unpacked carry-on bag that needed to be closed and zip it. The entire time I was doing this, I avoided looking at her. I could not. My self-control was weak enough without being spurred on by her depraved appearance. Penny clearly didn't realize how close I came to giving in to my resentment over her betrayal and physically hurting her when she started yelling at me. I perceived the words only vaguely. 6 months is a long time. You've only been gone 15 weeks, and I suspect you started cheating a few weeks ago. What about me? Wasn't I also alone for the same amount of time? All the other students are having fun with each other. How many of them have husbands at home? They made me feel young and free again, and not someone on the threshold of Grandma's childhood. Thanks for telling me there's more than just good old Jake. We can overcome this. Oh no, we can't. As I ran away, Penny's screams became louder and more desperate. From the other side of the door, I heard an increasingly worried echo. Finally, suitcase in hand, boots untied, and not looking over my shoulder, I opened the door. She almost hit me in the face as she was pushed from the outside, at the same time I pulled her from the inside. As a result, I found myself face to face with a young woman who I guessed was Gail. Over her shoulder, I saw Jenny looking discouraged. As I walked past my puzzled housemates towards the front door, I heard, "Who the hell are you?" Before slamming the outer door, I called over my shoulder, "Penny's ex-husband," emphasizing ex, and disappeared into the night. I had a plane to catch, a lawyer to meet, a marriage to end, a sad story to tell to family, friends, and family, a broken heart to mend, and a honey blonde to get to know better at the bar. I jumped in surprise when Mike answered the phone, half expecting the call to go to voicemail like all the other calls I'd made over the past 4 days. "Hello, Penelope. What's happened? I cannot speak for a long time." Despite all my attempts to get through and everything I thought I would say when he finally picked up, I was speechless. This is his tone. He confused me. He was neither heartbroken nor furious, which is what I was prepared for. I was not ready for indifference, neutrality. It's like I'm nothing more than an acquaintance. In the silence that followed, I heard his sigh of impatience. It sounded loud and I panicked, afraid he would hang up. "Please, Penelope, do it quickly. I don't have the whole day. I'm busy. Today is our quiz night." "Quiz night? How could that make him busy? How can he prioritize this over our marriage?" The words came out of my mouth before I could filter them. "Obviously, Penelope, you don't understand how important this is to me. I need it." I winced as I heard the echoes of previous conversations over the past 3 months. Part of me was ashamed of these conversations, but having Mike throw them in my face again made me angry. "Please don't belittle our marriage like that. We need to talk. I might as well not speak. Listen, I have to go. The team relies on my knowledge of history. I can't let them down. Let's talk later. I looked at my phone in disbelief, as if the screen could deceive the fact that Mike had just hung up. The wine I drank to calm my nerves before the call turned to vinegar in my stomach, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. I reflected, regretting my decision to stay rather than fly home immediately. I shouldn't have given Mike time to cool down, should have chased him, naked if I had to. What stopped me? I analyzed it. Fear, nerves, guilt, shame, and, of course, not wanting to hear Mike call me every vile name under the sun. All of this played a role to one degree or another, but, admittedly, the training course also played an important role. I had an important exam at the end of the module on Monday, and no matter what, I didn't want to give up 3 months of hard work. Yes, I had a lot of fun while I was away, but I also worked a lot and didn't want it to be in vain. Over the weekend, I used the need to study for an exam as a way to distract myself between several attempts to call Mike. The exam was yesterday. I haven't booked a ticket home yet, realizing that I'm delaying it. Somehow, encountering Miki in our own, homemade, it seemed more real. And for some reason, the house was Micah's territory, and the apartment was mine. As unlikely as it was, I hoped Mikey would return so we could talk on my turf. I lowered my head into my hands. It was hard to face reality. 4 days have passed. Mike wasn't going to come back to confront me. I looked at my phone again and saw that Jake had left me several messages. I ignored the temptation to open them. This was also difficult. Very hard. The time on the screen showed that it was already 7 o'clock. It's too late to ask the course coordinator for time off. We'll have to wait until morning. I hoped I wouldn't have to explain in detail why I needed time off. It would be awkward. Of course, it would be enough to say that I have family matters. Putting the phone in my pocket, I walked into the kitchen and looked into the pantry. She sighed. Everything on offer seemed like too much work, and besides, I had no appetite. I went to my room, lay down on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. I closed my eyes, but sleep did not come. My brain did not turn off. How can I make Mike understand that my absence is something completely separate from him and us, something parallel, not opposite? How can I make him understand that our marriage was never in jeopardy? I loved him. I have always loved and will always love. A flash of anger ran through me. Damn men and their egos. Damn pride. Yes, I broke my wedding vows, but only in the physical sense. My heart and mind still belong to Mike. How can I make him understand that this is the only thing that matters? Not a drop of sweaty fluid exchange. Of course I gave in to temptation, but just as this course will benefit us financially in the long run, my fall from grace will affect our sex life. God, can't he see that he'll finally have the vibrant, uninhibited sex life he's been craving for years? I rolled over and saw Mike's deodorant on the bedside table. He forgot it in his haste to leave. I leaned over and picked it up, bringing it to my face to smell it. The familiar smell brought tears to my eyes. I closed them and buried my face in the pillow, trying to erase the image of his shocked and pained face. I hurt him. This was not my intention, but despite this, I did it. And for this, I felt deep regret. Clutching the deodorant to my chest, I tried to focus on the positives. We haven't heard from any of our children. I hoped that meant Miki didn't tell them anything. He also didn't yell at me or call me names. That should be a good sign, right? I sat up straight. What if the reason Mike was dodging my calls and not calling the kids was because he was too busy meeting with lawyers, changing locks, and emptying bank accounts? What if his calm voice on the phone was him hiding his plot to destroy me? Our marriage? I jumped out of bed and rushed to the living room, where I left my laptop. I grabbed it and returned to the room. My ears were pounding as I waited for it to load. It seemed like an eternity had passed. With trembling fingers, I logged into our bank account. I leaned my elbows on the pillows, and the tears streaming down my cheeks were tears of relief. Mike didn't touch the money. I wiped my tears with the corner of the sheet. I was about to leave the bank when suddenly a thin voice warned me. Just because Mike hasn't emptied his accounts yet doesn't mean he won't. I didn't want to cause any backlash from him, but I also wanted to protect myself, so I transferred a small amount to an old account in my name, enough to pay for plane tickets, taxis, and food. I intended to log out. The truth was coming, but the small messenger icon showed that there were messages for me. It overcame my intentions. I clicked on it, and there it was. Jake. Gorgeous. 25-year-old Jake. Jake was too old to date my daughters, but he was texting me. To me, 48 years old. More tears streamed down my cheeks. Tears of disappointment and melancholy. Despite everything, most of all at that moment, I wanted to call him. I wanted to hear him tell me again how sexy I was. I longed to see in his face and body his need for me. I cursed the young man who started this. The first time I was taken advantage of was after I drank too much while trying to fit in with my younger classmates. But it was good, damn good. And then I couldn't stop. I wanted this again. I wanted lust. I wanted to see admiration and desire in their eyes. I wanted to hear again that I was the best woman in their life. I wanted to feel strong again. This power was addictive. I was at war with myself. I knew that if I answered Jake's messages, he would come. I wanted this. I whimpered. The sound came out of me. I clenched my fist and pressed it to my lips. I should have resisted. If Mike comes back or somehow finds out about this, it could mean the end of my marriage. I rolled over onto my stomach, causing the laptop to slide off the bed. He fell to the floor with a crash. I didn't care. I cried. She cried about her loss. There will be a price to pay to save my marriage. I must never give in to my addiction again. I must have fallen asleep because the next moment sunlight streamed through the window. Feeling terrible, I trudged into the bathroom to take a shower. I inserted my key into the lock and turned it. It worked. I stopped, bowing my head in relief. Mike didn't change the locks. Another good sign. He hasn't emptied the bank accounts, hasn't informed our kids, hasn't served me with divorce papers. It's Thursday, so he's had plenty of time to get them ready, and my keys still work. Mike will forgive me. It may take time, but he will forgive. I was filled with love. Mike is a good person, the best, and he loves me. He will find a way to come to terms with this, and we will move on with our lives. We will both pay a price for this. Mike will always know that I found pleasure with another man, and I will have to never go out with him again. Trails of fidelity. Of course, this is a high price, but it is worth paying. I opened the door, expecting to find the house in disarray. Mike's 3+ months of singleness were about to create a huge mess. I was mistaken. All is clear. Everything is neat, at least in the living room. I walked into the kitchen and into the dining room. It's the same there. Spotlessly clean. He even wiped off the dust. Was he cleaning here in preparation for my return? If yes, then this is another good sign. But where is he? It was 6:30. He should be home after work looking for his dinner. I walked over to the stove and ran my hand over the burners. They were stone cold. I checked the refrigerator. It has everything you need, including a plate of fried chicken and vegetables wrapped in plastic. Did he really cook something like that in the microwave for dinner? There are no dishes in the sink. Did he wash it and dry it, or decided to dine out? I thought about calling or texting him, but after our only conversation on Tuesday, I wasn't comfortable with what he would say. He definitely didn't come to pick me up at the airport, although I sent him an SMS with flight information. Sighing, I filled the kettle, ready to drink a much-needed cup of tea. While I waited for it to boil, I thought about the contradictory signs Mike was giving me. On the one hand, he did nothing that I could associate with his decision to end our marriage, but at the same time, he ignored my voicemails and text messages and did not meet me at the airport. Maybe he's just petty and wants to punish me. After making tea, I sat down at my usual place at our table. She looked at the table and the empty chairs surrounding it. So many family dinners have passed behind its shiny surface. I smiled, remembering the lively discussions and banter exchanged. We may not have been rich financially, but we certainly were in love and happiness. I was touched by these memories. Mike will remember them too, and he's such a softie when it comes to kids. He wouldn't want them to have to choose or divide their time between us. For this reason alone, he will find a way to forgive me. But the question remains open. Where is he? Leaving the cup of tea on the table, I climbed the stairs and walked along the corridor to Mike and my room. Fine. He was at home. There was still a slight warmth in our bathroom. Once again, I was struck by the cleanliness. It's not that Mike was a slob, but I thought that without my presence, he would go back to being a stereotypical guy and not cleaning up after himself. Deep in thought, I returned to the dining room. She sat and sipped tea. Where is he? Where could he go? My stomach growled. I was hungry. I went to the refrigerator. Could Mike have saved the chicken dinner for me? I lifted the edge of the wrapper and sniffed it. It smelled delicious. I put the plate in the microwave and sat down at the table while I waited for the beep. It bothered me that I had no idea where my husband was. I replayed our conversations over the past 16 weeks. What did Mike say he did to entertain himself? I was able to remember surprisingly little. I looked around the room again. It's not like he spends his nights at home. At this thought, a feeling of anxiety bloomed in my stomach. Mike never liked boys' sleepovers or weekend fishing trips. He has always been a family man. Has this changed during my absence? The edges of my consciousness were teased by a vague memory of a name Mike mentioned in the first few weeks of the course. Who was that? John, Jeremiah, Jason. I had a feeling that the name began with D, but all the options that I came up with did not evoke any response. And then I understood. Jeff, whose last name I couldn't remember. I rushed to the sideboard where we kept an old notebook. It was ancient, dating back to the times when we were too lazy to write down numbers in our mobile phones. Page after page, I looked through it looking for the name Jeff, and I found it under the letter S. Well, I found Jeff Saunders, and with another colored pen, a cell number was added, so I guessed it was the same Jeff. I entered the number into my phone. It beeped a few times, then went to voicemail. In frustration, I slammed my fist on the table. Will nothing work out? The clang of the microwave reminding me that I hadn't removed the reheated leftovers startled me. I completely forgot about food. I decided to eat my dinner, using the time to think about what I would say when I was able to contact Jeff. The roast turned out to be surprisingly tasty. Once my relationship with Mike gets better, I'll have to encourage him to cook more often. Still chewing the last bite, I collected my plate and cutlery and took them to the sink. Now that it was time for my second attempt to call Jeff, I was nervous. What if Mike told him? I remembered that Jeff was pretty straightforward. What if he attacked me? I sighed, realizing that I would have to come to terms with this. Having made my decision, I opened my call log and pressed redial for Jeff's number. He answered after the third ring. Hello? There was a question in his greeting. Hi, Jeff. This is Penny Granger. I was wondering if you knew where Mike was. There was a long pause, and I held my breath, hoping he wouldn't hang up. His silence allowed the background noise to break through. He was clearly somewhere where other people had gathered. Hello, Penny. Long time no see. Yes. How are you doing? And how? I paused, trying to pull the name of Jeff's wife from the depths of my mind. Jane and the children. Jane is fine, he replied, emphasizing his wife's name. I shuddered. Now was not the time to get her name wrong and potentially offend her husband. Everything is great with all of yous. What about you? I thought I misunderstood the tone of Jeff's last question. He knew. It got better. Is Mike with you? Yes, with me. And where are you? At a darts competition among pairs. I clenched my teeth, holding back a sarcastic response. Jeff knew that I wanted to know where my husband was. I asked twice, but it was clear that he was going to make sure that giving me this information would be like pulling teeth. Sounds wonderful. And where is it? In the pub. Which pub? At my local one. I closed my eyes. Damn smart guy. What is the name of your local pub? I asked, trying to maintain a pleasant tone. Royal. Not wanting to give him the satisfaction of asking for his address, I thanked him and walked away. His parting words, spoken with causticity, infuriated me. Anything for the best half. Mike. A sarcastic freak. I opened my internet browser and typed "The Royal" into Google. It turned out that there were several of them. There are Royal Hands, Royal George, and Royal Oak. Asshole. It took me another 10 minutes of visiting each pub's website to discover that the Royal Oak was hosting a couples darts competition. I grabbed my bag, stopping in the hallway only to check that my hair and makeup were still in order. There was neither one nor the other. I frowned at my reflection, rummaging through my bag for my makeup bag and comb. 5 minutes later, I was in decent shape and was already walking out the door. Throwing my bag into the passenger seat of my Toyota, I started the engine and, while I waited for the garage door to open, I entered the address of the Royal Pub into the GPS. Fortunately, the journey did not have to be long, otherwise my patience and nerves were stretched to the limit. I was relieved to discover that the pub had its own car park, although there weren't many spaces available. Couples darts competitions must be popular. Just at this thought, I paused. What does Mike do at the couples competition? Was he just there to cheer on Jeff and Jean? I swallowed my anxiety and headed toward the entrance. I followed the noise. He led me into a room lined with tables. There were 2 dartboards set up against the far wall, and the game was in full swing. I looked around the room and found Mike on the left. His face was turned towards one of the dart games. An attractive blonde sat next to him. She did not follow the game, but watched the entrance, and she looked straight at me. The look on her face said it all. She knows. Warmth crept up my neck. I felt it spreading across my face. I watched as she lightly squeezed Mike's hand. He turned and looked straight at me. I don't know what I expected. Pain, grief, anger, the look of a man who has had many sleepless nights. Whatever I expected, I was disappointed. He looked the same as always. I think that's what made me freeze in place. My gaze was riveted on him. I could not tear myself away. In my peripheral vision, I saw the blonde squeeze his hand again. My heart sank as I saw Mike place his hand over hers and pat it reassuringly. This gesture spoke of acquaintance, about friendship, about caring. And then Mike disappeared, blocked from prying eyes by his broad shoulders. The man was standing in my personal space. I took a step back, not recognizing him until he spoke. "Hello, Penny." "Oh, Jeff." "Hi," I stammered. "I came looking for Mike." "I got what you mean. And, I'd like to thank you." "All is well with him?" "Well, I mean, I know he must have been upset after, well, after he came back from visiting me. I hope this didn't affect you and Jane too much. Everything was fine with him, even excellent." This confused me. Fine? Great? How can he be okay after... I couldn't finish the sentence. After finding out that you've been cheating on him behind his back for the last 4 months. The heat in my cheeks intensified. They seemed to be on fire. Whether I was guilty or not, it was bad form on his part to voice my indiscretion. I gave him a withering look, wishing I had the opportunity to turn him into a pile of ash. Jeff laughed at me. My rage grew. I clenched my fists. "Yes, but it's none of your business. I highly doubt things are as great with Mike as you say. We've been married 28 years and he loves me. I know he must be devastated. He's just hiding it so as not to make you feel awkward and uncomfortable." That means he's a good actor. I had to agree. Looking over Jeff's shoulder, I realized that Mike was doing a great job of looking unconcerned. He and the blonde stood in front of one of the dart boards, with Mike preparing to throw the first dart. Looks like his partner was a blonde. I did not like it. I didn't like it one bit. For all my dependence on men young enough to be my sons, I was not blind to their attributes. They were like meringues, light, sweet and tasty, but ultimately unsatisfying as a meal. Like sugar, they have no substance. Mike, on the other hand, was a premium steak, filling and best eaten slowly to savor the flavor. Who is this woman? I hated being forced to ask, but the need to know overrode my reluctance to reveal my vulnerability. Jeff turned his head to look at Mike and the blonde and smiled. "Oh, this is Andrea." Once again, Jeff was infuriating, answering only my direct question and not offering anything additional. "Is she here with anyone? She is married?" I hope that by asking two questions at once, I will soon receive two answers. Yes and no. I was tired and stressed, which made it even harder than usual for me to remain patient. "So, yes, she is here with someone, but no, she is not married?" "Yes." The anxiety inside me grew, and part of me wanted to walk away and not ask the next logical question. I was almost sure that I wouldn't like the answer. "Who is she here with?" "With Mike." Despite mentally preparing myself, I backed away as if I had been slapped. "Well, it didn't take him long," I muttered, the pain nullifying my verbal filter. "On the contrary," Jeff said, his eyes like lasers burning a hole right into me. "He had 4 months to get used to being alone." He looked again at Mike and the blonde and smiled. I think he took to it like a duck takes to water. He looked at me and his smile disappeared. His tone cut me like a knife. "But then again, so are you. It's been 8 years since Mike divorced me, and not a day goes by that I don't regret the actions that led to our separation. Of course, when it became clear that reconciliation was impossible, I was given the opportunity to indulge my addiction, but it was a hollow victory. It didn't take me long to realize that a constant sugar diet was ultimately unsatisfying, and the law of diminishing returns was at work. I spent 8 years searching for that elusive first high. If only I had realized then that I was doomed to fail. I try not to think about all my hobbies and how they are getting shorter and shorter in duration. Even less do I want to think about other forbidden boundaries that I crossed. I was once a reserved lover, afraid that if I showed too much pleasure, my husband would think I was a slut and lose respect for me. I have now had more lovers than I can count on my fingers and toes, 3 times. I did things that I pray my children never find out about. My relationship with them is already fragile. Looking around the kitchen and dining room, I feel despair. Without Mike, these rooms seem empty. He brought warmth and laughter. Now they are silent. They were once part of the house, but now they are just part of the house. I guess I should consider myself lucky that Mike agreed to sell me his share of the house for less than market value, especially since I never returned to finish my course and remain a general nurse to this day, but it's hard to feel happy when I know what lies behind his generosity. Andrea, damn Andrea, was rich, and she wanted Mike, with or without money. I knew for sure that they had now set off on a trip around the world. Scotland, Venice, Florence, the Greek islands, all of it. I knew because they paid for all the children, hers and his, and the grandchildren to meet them in Hawaii in a few weeks. This meant that I would spend Christmas alone, again. I looked at my watch. It's time to go to work. I packed my bag and headed to the front door. Out of habit, I looked at my reflection in the mirror and winced. I am 56, and age is rapidly catching up with me. It's getting harder and harder to attract young guys. In truth, the young guys aren't that young anymore. They are no longer 20, but 30, and even 40. I sighed in resignation. What else could I do? There are few men of my age who are suitable for marriage, at least the good ones. And no matter whether they are good or bad, no one wants to marry me. My reputation precedes me. The only option would be to move to the other side of the country and start over. But that would mean moving away from my children, and I don't see them enough anyway, not to mention there would be an entire continent between us. While Mike and his damn Andrea were probably kicking back and sipping Mai Tais, I went to change the bedding and put in the thermometers. I will end my days as a general nurse, destroying both my marriage and my career. And for what? For nothing. For the taste of sugar. Sweet but bitter sugar. I blinked away tears of self-pity. Why cry? Nobody cares. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.